Chapter 9. When I woke up, it took me a minute to understand why I felt overwhelmed. I remembered the fire that had surged out of nowhere and the way Daniel had saved me. I remembered both kisses he had stolen, and a bubble of warmth settled into my stomach. Then, I remembered the visions of him. I sat up with panic racing in my chest. One vision had haunted me, invading my dreams. I had woken up because of it. It was the vision of Daniel turning into one of those dark demons. In my dream, I had felt all his fear again. It was made worse by my own fear. I set my feet on the cold floor, willing the panic to fade from my chest. The wind gusted as the house creaked and popped in protest. Rain lashed against the glass panes of my dark windows. Outside, a storm was raging out of control. Scared of shadows, the dream haunting me, I wrapped the blanket Daniel had placed around me more tightly and tiptoed across to the stairs. I crept down the stairs and went to Ellen's room, quietly so I wouldn't disturb her. I pushed back her bedroom door and peeked inside. She was snoring gently and mumbling incoherently into her pillow. The shadows from the swaying trees outside played on the delicate angles of her face, but she was peaceful. Seeing her there was wonderful, normal. It calmed some of the panic in my chest. Making up my mind, I put my blanket in the chair by the window and crawled under the covers with her. Her arms wrapped around me as I settled in close. "You okay, sweetie?" she asked sleepily. "I am now. That's good," she mumbled. I smiled when she snuggled closer and gave a sleepy grunt. It wasn't long before she drifted off again, her dreams peaceful. I tried to clear my mind, focusing on the peace of her dreams, but the panic was resilient. Even though I had spent most of my life running at the first sign of danger, I had come to develop a certain level of control over that form of living. I was used to it. It made sense. That world of running was spiraling out of control now, and I didn't know what to do about it, especially since it was spiraling out of control for a very strange reason. It wasn't because of the strange fire. It wasn't the fact that Daniel was the first person I'd met who was like me. It was because I knew he wasn't just a friend anymore. The panic in my chest at fearing he would turn into a demon, the way I wanted to protect him, those feelings were just too real. Weirdness aside, I had fallen head over heels for that stupid football-playing angel. Even though I had seen the intensity of his emotions for me, I wasn't certain if the vision was real, or if it could be a lie. If it hadn't been a lie, I wasn't certain I could let someone have that much power over me. Ellen's love had power, but I knew from years of experience she wouldn't just leave me. Her love was forever. She had proven beyond a doubt that she would love me, even if I was a freaky mind-reading half-angel. My father was a different story. Ellen had given him her heart, and he had returned the favor by tearing it out. Isn't that, above all the other reasons, why I hated him? I saw the love Ellen had for him, and I saw how hard she struggled against the pain his leaving had caused. Even if things worked out with Sam, if they were happy for the rest of time, my father would always have a piece of Ellen's heart. She would always be just a little bit less. I knew that if I gave Daniel my heart, he could do the same thing to me. I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want someone I couldn't trust owning my heart. Was it in our nature to walk away? Was it in Daniel's nature? I fought over my weeks of Daniel. Was it even possible to feel this intensely in so short a time? Was it just gratitude for him saving my life? I started stroking Ellen's hair to calm my racing thoughts, taking comfort in the familiar action. I tried to think about it logically, going over every day, every minute we had been together. I thought about our bickering, our playful, intense conversations. Daniel teaching me about cars, arguing about philosophy books and ideas, our time hanging out at the cafe and going on long walks around town. I analyzed every second, trying to be honest with myself. It wasn't just gratitude that had me feeling this way. It was more. I scowled at the ceiling. Who was he to make me feel this way? The anger bounced around my head like some horrible emotional ping-pong ball. I felt so damned dependent suddenly. I sighed in exasperation and watched the play of light from the trees on the wall. I couldn't decide if when I saw him next I would kiss him or hit him. Both were extremely appealing. Morning dawned slow and dim. The only thing that kept me from getting out of bed was the fact that I would see Daniel today. He would come by after Ellen left for work. As I lay in bed watching the murky light spread across the wood floor, my nervousness growing with every inch the sun spread, Ellen's eyes popped open like someone had blown in her ear. "Morning, sweetie." "Good morning." She touched my face, her eyes full of worry. "I didn't get to talk to you last night. Are you okay? You weren't hurt, right?" "No, I wasn't hurt." A vision of Daniel throwing me into the pool floated across my eyes. What happened? Something scary happened? I can see it in her eyes. What is she keeping from me? She never keeps things from me. I stared at her even as half-truths popped into my head. She was right. Ellen and I shared everything, and I was keeping a secret that could get us both killed. I took a deep breath and sat up, pushing my back against the headboard for support. I tried to think of the best way to handle this. Looking in her warm chocolate eyes, I knew I couldn't keep this from her. She had to know. I told her everything, every dangerous detail, not glossing over anything. She listened in silence, though I could hear her thoughts working overtime. Finally, the thoughts died down, and she took a deep breath, surprising me with her calm. "I trust you, Claire. I trust that you know people. If you think Daniel's dangerous, we will leave right this second. No questions asked. We've left for less." What did I think? I don't think he's dangerous, not in that way. I mean, I know he doesn't work for the others, but... The only thing I had glossed over during my explanation was the fact that Daniel had kissed me twice, and that I had seen the vision of him. I wasn't comfortable telling her about that, only mentioning how he had breathed for me. I don't know where. "You were worried about that fire and the thoughts you've been overhearing?" she asked. "Yeah." "But Daniel protected you," she said tentatively. "Would he do it again? We've never actually met anyone like you, Claire. One that wasn't bad. This could be an opportunity for you. You know how little your father told me. You could learn what to expect on your birthday. And if Daniel is willing to look out for you, I'd be willing to stay." Images of Sam's face, of Alex's face, of friends she had started to reconnect with floated through my head. I ignored the images, determined to do whatever was safe. I had to make sure Ellen didn't get hurt because of me. "I don't want to be protected, Mom. Besides, what if he doesn't want to protect us? What if he has a change of heart? What then?" "A change of heart?" I clamped my lips shut. I hadn't meant to say that. "It's okay to let people in," she said. I started playing with my necklace. "I just don't want to end up..." "Like me?" I could hear the pain in her voice. "Well, yes," I told her honestly. "You need to stop thinking like that. Your father left for us." She sat up. "He left so we could be safe, after I got attacked." "What?" I exclaimed. "Oh, I didn't tell you that," she said as if she had forgotten to tell me something far less important. "I was attacked one night when I was walking home from work. That was when I was pregnant with you and living with Naomi. Naomi was the first friend Ellen had made after running away from home. Together, they had hitched rides out to Los Angeles, where Naomi had a very understanding grandmother. We went to visit Naomi whenever we could, and they talked on the phone weekly. She was like an aunt to me. It was very hidden. I didn't know what had happened until it was over. They took my blood. Ellen rubbed her belly. Our blood. I was stunned. Ellen had been attacked, and she never told me. I was even more stunned. She had been able to keep the attack from her mind. That was something a person thought about occasionally, right? My father left because you got attacked? Doesn't that seem contrary? If he loved you, he should have stayed. I said pugnaciely, not ready to give up 16 years of bitter resentment and hate. He did what he had to, she said simply. I love him, but I knew from the beginning we could never be together the way I wanted to be. But why would anyone want your blood? I shielded away from saying, my blood. I don't know. Your father didn't know either. I sighed. Why is it I just keep getting questions piled on the list instead of answers? I'm sorry, sweetie. She touched my face. But I want you to stop hating him so much. Love comes in a lot of forms, and they are all valid. She threw back her large comforter, not wanting to talk anymore. I have to get ready for work. She hesitated, then added, unless you want me to stay home with you. Sam would understand. No, I'm fine, I said quickly. Did they cancel school? I asked, wondering how she knew I would be staying home. No, but I think you've earned a day off for almost dying. Thanks, I said sarcastically. She kissed me on the cheek, telling me in her thoughts how glad she was that I was safe. Warmed by her love, I got out of the bed to give her some privacy and went downstairs. Not able to control my restless energy, I pulled down the pancake mix, thinking I could kill 2 birds with 1 delicious stone. By the time Ellen came down, wearing a blue suit that looked stunning against her pale skin, I'd made enough pancakes to feed a regiment. Hungry? She asked. Starving, I replied, stuffing my face. She ate in a great rush, our talk having put her behind schedule. Food hanging out of her mouth, she ran out the door. See you later. Wait for it, I said, to the bowl of pancake batter, then dropped uncooked batter onto the counter. The clock turned over a couple of seconds. I heard the door reopen. Claire, have you seen my phone? I picked up Ellen's phone from its place on the counter and put my hand around the corner of the door. She ran down the hall and plucked it from my fingers. Thanks. The door shut with a bang. As soon as it shut, the tension I felt boiled over, filling my stomach with butterflies. How long would I have to wait for Daniel? I had learned he was compulsively early, showing up a good 15 minutes early to even minor events. Whether it was to the movies, a study date, or simply to hang out, he was always there before it was time. I washed the breakfast dishes, then paced the length of the kitchen. I hadn't told Daniel what time Ellen went to work. Did he know when to come over? I sat down at the table and started tapping impatiently on the light-colored wood. I stopped when I realized I had adapted his bad habit. I waited impatiently for over an hour, alternating between sitting and pacing. The rain stopped, wayward droplets falling from the trees in response to animals scurrying along their branches. Patchy sunlight filtered down through the rolling clouds. Each shift in the light was an eternity. I opened the kitchen window, thinking the sweet smell of rain-drenched earth would help my nerves. It just made me feel more impatient. It was past time for me to go to school when I realized that Daniel wasn't coming. I had embarrassed him, or had offended him, or in some way made him feel like I didn't care for him. I thought about the way I had told him to leave. I cursed my stupidity, my foolish mouth. I stood again and walked around the table in an endless circle, recalling every stupid thing I had said. I practically jumped out of my skin when I heard the front door open softly and footsteps cross the hall. I ran to the kitchen door. My heart pounded excitedly. He'd come after all. For the first time since meeting her, I was disappointed to see Alex. Her welcome smile slowly turned into a frown as she stared at my face. What in the world? What's wrong? I answered without thinking. Have you ever seen 16 Candles? About 1,000,000 times. It's my favorite movie. I'd known that when I asked my question. You know this scene when Molly Ringwald is crying in the car and Anthony Michael Hall comes in and sees her utterly devastated over a boy? Yes. Multiply that by 1,000,000 and you've only touched the surface of where I'm at, I said, not able to pretend any longer. What? A thought occurred to her and she interrupted herself. Wait, does that make me Anthony Michael Hall? I put my hands over my face and sat. I don't know, I groaned. She sat next to me, her thoughts trying to play catch-up to what I was telling her. This must be about Daniel. Her thoughts turned smug. She does like him. But what happened? Did they have a fight? I mean, a real fight. Not those ridiculous fights they have. The way she's acting, she must have done something wrong. But what? I might have said the wrong thing to him, I answered. A second passed, then another. I dropped my hands slowly, realizing what I had done. I started to form an excuse. She cut me off. Her thoughts were racing around the fact that my answer matched her thoughts too closely, but when she spoke, she was calm. What did you say to him? I stared at her for a moment, then ran a hand through my hair, realizing I needed a shower. I hadn't bathed since my encounter with the pool. The pool. Why did everything have to change? I'm not going to go into all the details, but he shared something personal with me, and I told him to leave because I wasn't ready to handle it. Claire! Her voice was exasperated. I know. I feel like an ass. You don't need to add it to it. You can't expect me to give you any kind of advice without knowing the particulars. I frowned and realized that I was looking for her advice, that I wanted to know what to do. But I couldn't tell her all the weird stuff, and the weird stuff had a lot to do with, well, everything. It's okay, she said all at once, surprising me. You can trust me with your secret. I know how strange you are. She paused and smiled at me. And I don't just mean personality-wise. You and Daniel are both strange in ways that other people aren't. My insides turned to ice. She knew I was different. She knew you were different. I went through a dozen excuses trying to come up with an explanation or some way to make her less suspicious. Everything I came up with sounded ridiculous. She was too smart, and I was too awful at lying. She looked at my panicked face and reached out to pat my hand. Don't have a heart attack. I've known for ages that Daniel is different. It's pretty obvious. She frowned as she searched for the right words. When he's around people, it's like he's thinking light years ahead, analyzing every movement before he acts. Sometimes I can see that it's a thin thread holding him back from the damage he could do. It's as if he wanted to, which I'm fairly sure he doesn't. He could kill every single person in town and not get a scratch. I shivered as her words, which were bizarrely accurate, brought up another reason for my fear. I had seen what he was capable of. The vision swam in front of my eyes again. A score of dead rapists and murderers lying in a pool of their own blood. They had deserved their fates, but I knew he enjoyed killing them too much. Claire! Huh? I asked, dazed. A satisfied smirk crossed her lips. It took me a moment to understand why. She hadn't said anything aloud. I cursed my tired brain, but Alex didn't bring up the knowledge she just learned. She brought up the thing that mattered most to her. "What did he share that made you force him to leave?" she asked. I stared at her without answering. "Okay, well, if you're going to be all secretive, I'll just guess again." She didn't have to think about what she was saying. It came out in a boiling rush. "He did something, like protecting you from whatever happened at the pool, and in doing so, you saw how much he liked you. You, in turn, pushed him away because you were so freaking used to depending on yourself. You pushed him away because something about him scares you. Maybe it's the fact you are used to people ignoring you, and he can't. He won't." She x-rayed me with her eyes. "Well, here's my advice. Take it or leave it. I don't think there's a better person for you to divulge those feelings to than Daniel. He's craving the same kind of companionship you are. Only, unlike you, he knows he craves it. I think he would keep your secrets, support your weaknesses, and celebrate your strengths until his dying day. That's the type of person he is. That being said, I think you should show him you want him. If you want to be with someone, you shouldn't let your fear keep you from them." She stood abruptly. "But you don't have to take my advice." I stood as well. Even though I towered over her, I felt as if she were the one doing the towering. "How do you do that?" I demanded, wondering if she had a superpower too. Something about her. She just saw everything free of pretense and clutter. It's like when she looked at me with her baby blues, she could look past the surface and see straight into my soul. I look. I listen. She brushed her short hair back, and pain flashed in her eyes for a second as I heard, "I wish I could keep out some of what I saw. Now, go take a shower and I'll drive you to the sheriff's office so you can give your statement. It's why I came over. Well, that and I really wanted to skip math." "I don't know why you were being so bossy all of a sudden," I huffed. She ushered me out of the kitchen, putting her hands on the small of my back to get me moving. "Because that's the only way people get through to you. Brutal honesty with a hint of bossiness thrown in for good measure. I don't like it." She gave me another gentle push to get me walking up the stairs. "I'm pretty sure you are not supposed to." "Promise something?" I paused on the steps, fighting a smile. "Sure. Promise to talk to me like that more often." "I'm certain that won't be a problem." She went to the living room and flipped on the television, settling onto our old sofa. "You don't have to hurry with your shower either. I told Mr. Sampson that I might not make it to his class. I would love you forever if you could help me miss chemistry too." "I'll see what I can do." I did everything I needed to, taking extra time, as promised, and went back downstairs to find Alex sprawled across the couch, watching one of those horrifying modeling shows. "Are you serious?" I asked when I saw what she was watching. "Shh! Are you serious?" I sat down on the arm of the couch and stared at the TV in amused disgust. One of the anorexic-looking women started crying because another model had talked about her behind her back. It cut to the model who had said the mean things, her sassiness obnoxious and overdone. God! Alex clicked the program off and jumped up. "It's just one of those guilty pleasures," she said defensively. "You should feel guilty. It's just a show," she disagreed. "It's a show that teaches girls that being generic and bland is beautiful. It also teaches that backstabbing and insincerity is how you get things in this life. It shows that to be beautiful you must first be awful. I can't think of anything worse than pushing those ideals onto the rest of us. I mean, most people don't and shouldn't look like that. Shows like that is one reason there are so many insecure girls, and I hate them with a fiery passion. Alex blinked at me, startled by my anger. You are right, she said. I didn't think about it like that. I won't watch it ever again. She held up 2 fingers. Scout's honor. I watched, already feeling sheepish. I couldn't spout off to her like I could to Daniel without feeling guilty. He had proven he could argue back with emphasis and didn't resent me for my honesty. Not everyone was like that. I held the front door open for her when we crossed the yard to her car in silence. Alex started her Jeep and spun it around so that we were facing the proper direction. I held onto the door, trying to keep my seat. Sorry for going off on you about that show. I apologized as we raced down the road. It's cool. I get to yell at you for things. It's only fair you yell back at sometimes. She smiled briefly and over the roar of the wind asked, Were you waiting for Daniel when I came over? I should have known she wasn't going to drop it so easily. I started playing with my necklace anxiously. Yeah, he was supposed to come over once Ellen left. If it makes you feel any better, he wasn't at school this morning when I went in to make my excuses. Maybe something came up? Maybe. I wasn't betting on it. She squealed around another corner and headed down one of the numerous deserted highways surrounding the town. The stores and the bright shops on Main Street faded with the turn, and the occasional farmstead became the dominant structure. Where did they put the sheriff's station? South Carolina? I asked, after 10 minutes of driving on the same road. My mood was sour. Had Daniel thought I would show up at school looking for him? Was he too afraid to see me again? Alex shrugged. Everything just takes a little longer around here. Driving places, conversations. She made a face. That and the old station on Main Street burned down when a drunk driver crashed his car into the building 2 years ago. They thought building out here would be safer. Oh. As overwhelming swirl of thought reached out to me in a great storm, I flinched from the sound, wishing someone would make mental earplugs. The sound increased the closer we got to the station. I couldn't get specifics from the chaos, but something had happened, something bad. The voices buzzed like bees whose nest was being attacked by a hungry bear. With another squeal of tires, Alex pulled into a small parking lot. Tall pines arched over the brick building. The trees and the dark red brick made the station look folksy and unabashedly southern. I looked around for Andy Griffith, figuring he couldn't be far off. The swirling voices grew louder, obviously coming from the building. I tried to furtively to block them out, but it was useless. Alex frowned as she tried to squeeze her Jeep into a space too small for it, having no other choice because of the number of cars parked there. Something must have happened. There's never this many people here. They say the animal got her. It just doesn't make any sense. I wonder if they'll let old Sue and me hunt her alone, or force some fool on us. I think I'll concentrate most of the searches here near Route 7 and spread out from there. I'll need you to call the Adamses and make sure it's okay for us to search on their land. I wonder if Bubba brought his dog. Check and see. Jim should lead the second wave of searches here and here. He's got the best eye for Taryn. I think you are right, I said. As we entered the station, I saw that it wasn't a beehive that had been disturbed, but an anthill. People swarmed around the large open office, looking at reports and maps, plotting a course of action, often stumbling into each other. Their thoughts and plans swirled around in my head. my brain latching on to the information even as I marveled at the activity. I had gotten used to a slow way of operating around here, where people casually strolled up the street, stopping to talk to a friend or passerby, where conversations were conducted over well-cooked meals. This was proof these southern folks could move fast when provoked. It was proof I had never expected to get. "Who are we supposed to talk to?" I asked. Alex grabbed my arm. "This way." She deftly wove between the swarming people. We had to jump out of the way of several very woodsy men who were gathering their gear and yelling at each other in their hard-to-understand mountain dialect. Around the people, Alex found the man she had been looking for. She stopped in front of a small desk shoved into a smaller corner. "Hey, Chuck." The man looked up, and his moon face transformed into a friendly smile. "Hey, Alex, how's your dad?" "Just fine, thank you." He frowned, trying to place where he had seen me before. I squirmed a little under his gaze, avoiding eye contact with him. He had been one of the officers at the school yesterday. He was the one with the quick thoughts, wondering how I had survived when the fire had been well above boiling point. He remembered me all at once, noting I looked better when I didn't look like a wet dog. "How can I help you, ladies?" "Claire here has to give a statement of what happened yesterday," Alex said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Oh, of course. Daniel talked me to about that, but with everything that's..." His eyes swept the bustling office. "We are kind of swamped, but you can use the interrogation room to write your report down." "Okay," I said, eager to get this over with and leave, so I could have some peace. Chuck stood and searched for the form I needed to fill out. Alex wasn't as distracted by the voices as I was. "What's happened, Chuck?" she asked, looking around the crowded room. He hesitated. "I don't want to scare them, but maybe I should tell them, so they don't go wandering around in the woods. A forest ranger went missing. She was one of the people we had tracking the animal that killed Ryan." I hadn't realized they were still searching for that animal. It had been weeks. The flash of what I had seen behind my house rose up, a stark reminder that someone had died and someone who cared enough to hunt for his killer had gone missing. Alex gasped at the news, her thoughts immediately focused with concern for the missing woman. "Where did she go missing?" I asked before she could get Chuck sidetracked with platitudes. "Near Route 7, towards the Adams estate. The sheriff just told me to call them and get permission to search their land, so..." He rattled the paper at me and started walking towards the interrogation room, waddling a bit due to his excessive weight. "When did she go missing?" I asked, skipping a little to catch up. He was large, but he could move fast. "She didn't report in like normal yesterday evening, and she always reports in, when one of the other rangers found her bag and blood nearby." "Do you know if she has any idea what's happened behind the attacks?" I asked. "No," he said sharply. I heard the truth. I still can't see how that human footprint she found relates to Ryan, or why she was so determined to make us think a human had done this. The other print we found was more convincing. I mean, the man was torn apart. I've seen plenty of people on drugs capable of killing, but nothing like this. "Here you go." He opened a wooden door and Alex and I filed in. I sat down on a rickety chair in the sterile room and immediately started writing, so he would leave. He gave a cheerful wave and disappeared to make his phone call and organize the search. "Can you believe that?" Alex asked as soon as the door was shut. I hesitated. "Yes." She sat down opposite me. "You can?" "A man was torn apart. I would expect anyone venturing out those woods would be in danger. But it's just so weird. Everything is just... weird. That poor woman. I hope she didn't encounter whatever is out there. I started writing at supersonic speed as a rash plan formed in my head. When the woman had disappeared where she had tracked whatever was killing people, it was too close to Daniel's house. I knew what he was capable of. I knew if he felt his family was being threatened, he would do what it took to protect them. I had to know if he was behind it. If the reason he hadn't shown up to my house this morning was because he was adding another victim to his list. Claire? I turned my thoughts to the present. This time Alex wasn't testing me. Yeah? Are you going to come back to school with me, or should I drop you off at home? I thought about it. Could you drop me off at your dad's office? Sure, it's not that far from here. Why? I need to talk to Ellen, I replied, having no intention of involving Alex in my plan. It was too dangerous. She looked at my statement and my increasingly messy handwriting. Are you finished? With a flourish, I signed my name at the bottom of the page. Yep. Everyone was gathered around the sheriff when we let ourselves out into the main office. Sheriff Cobb was an older man, so thin and stooped he looked ready to blow away. His silver hair was neatly combed, his uniform wrinkle-free, and I knew he was fabulous about appearance. He was dividing the searchers into groups based on talents. Despite his age, his eyes were sharp, and I sensed a keen intellect. His voice was strong and certain as he talked to the room, a contradiction to his weak appearance. Chuck respectfully hovered at his side, listening in mute support. I went over to Chuck's desk to set my statement down for him to find later, my mind on what I was planning and how I would get Ellen to let me borrow the car. As I did, the door opened and a cool wind swirled through the office. The sheriff stopped talking at the sight of the person who had entered the room. Daniel's friend, Margaret, walked in, a serious smile on her perfect face. She was wearing a heavy leather jacket and tight blue jeans. Under her arm she carried a heavy helmet with a face shield. She stepped through the room, parting the crowd like they were the Red Sea. Her satisfied smile developed into a smile I knew too well as the men moved out of her way. It was the smile Daniel used when he was trying to charm people. She stopped in front of Chuck. As she started speaking, I heard a crush of thoughts from the male population I would have given anything not to hear. Daniel had to go on an emergency trip out of town with his parents and couldn't come in to give his statement. She held up a piece of paper, but he wrote everything down for you, just as it happened, and signed it. Will that be okay? She turned the full force of her smile on Chuck, and I almost felt sorry for the man. Her eyes flicked to mine for an instant, but she didn't say anything or draw attention to me. I was grateful. I didn't want any more attention from the crowd. I was certain that added thoughts would kill me, too. She was intimidating. I shivered as her cold stare from yesterday rose in my mind. It was so different from her expression now, but I couldn't forget. Chuck stammered an answer. This is fine, thank you. He paused. I just tried to call his parents, actually, but no one picked up. You say they are out of town? Yes. They left yesterday to go to Boston. What did you need, Deputy? Maybe I can help. He puffed his chest out, liking how she had called him Deputy. Most people just called him Chuck. We just wanted to ask if it was okay to come onto their property and search for a missing forest ranger. The last time she was seen was near Route 7, near the old well house. Oh, goodness! I know they won't care if you search their property, not if it meant saving someone's life. Thank you. Tell the Adamses I said hello when you talk to them. Of course. It's good to see you back in town, he stammered. Her eyes played havoc on his senses as her smile turned coy. I crossed my arms, annoyed. Daniel's tactics weren't just his. But had she learned such tactics from him, or vice versa? Her violet gaze turned to me, and I knew that she wanted me to follow her outside. She nodded once and walked towards the door, parting the crowd again before disappearing with another blast of chilly mountain air.